Elena, you must have seen many productions on stage of What the Butler Saw. I mean, how does it work, do you think, as a piece of television?
Yeah, I think it does, yeah. I mean, I prefer the stage plays, but I mean, I think there are difficulties, I think, when you transfer it onto film. But I mean, I must have seen at least 5 or 6 What the Butler Saws, and I personally think it's his masterpiece too. And I think in this play and Loot, I think Joe had really found his voice. He'd really come into his own with these last 2 plays. And unfortunately, you know, he was dispatched by Kenneth Halliwell before he could write any more. So who knows what he'd have gone on to write.
I mean, John Lahr raises a very good point, doesn't he, about farce and the screen. And I mean, it is very good, but I found that there's no breathing space. In a stage version of What the Butler Saw, there is room for the audience to gather itself. With
what you're saying is that there's no overview.
No, there's a ceaseless momentum for 90 minutes, isn't there? I mean, how well do you think it works on screen?
Well, what I've never realised until this viewing is that the ending of the play is a complete pastiche of Shakespeare, isn't it? I mean, it's Twelfth Night. It's one of those plays where that we've got half of this and we've got half of this, and I found that very enjoyable. I mean, and Joe did actually what he was aware of was he really liked the idea of bad theatre. This is what he enjoyed sort of sending up, and I think it's got that element. I hadn't really taken that aboard before.
Yes, you're right. It's those Shakespeare comedies where there's all those reconciliations and discoveries with the added touch of incest, which you don't normally get at the end of.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And to pick up that point, what Orton always does is take the genre and turn the genre expectations on their head. So, for instance, in farce, the whole notion is that whatever happens in the mayhem, life is returned to the status quo ante, right? But here, that's what he's playing when they all come together with the medallion and everything. But then what they're celebrating is the happy ending is incest, a bestseller. So all that sends up the boulevard idea of the happy ending, which is brilliant.
But I just would like to just trace briefly some of the history of this remarkable play. It did have a disastrous first night. Were you there, Lane, at the very, very first performance?
No, I wasn't at the first night, no, but I did sort of get back from Peggy Ramsey's agent how awful the production was.
Yes.
And that people were walking out and it was just dreadful. I mean, it should have been better because, I mean, you had people like Adrian Corrie and
Ralph Richardson,
Stanley Baxter, Miss Prentice. I mean, it should have really done well, but I think the audience was so shocked and outraged, and I don't think they knew really what to make of it.
Yes.
It was so new, really. It was such new theatre at the time, I think.
Yes, I mean, John, you reconstructed that famous first night.
Yes, well, first of all, it was barracked. But one of the problems with Orton was he was a great stylist, and unlike all the other great modern theatrical stylists, Pinter, Coward, Shaw, you could argue, he didn't live long enough to teach actors and directors how to do his work, to show, because Orton is deadly serious in a frivolous or apparently frivolous form, actors and directors initially didn't know how to make that work. They went for the joke rather than the reality of things. So that the first productions of Loot and What the Butler Saw, were disastrous. And it has taken a lot of time for theater people to find the style, to merge the farce structure with some sort of gravity, what you said, of playing. I mean, you reviewed recently this production of Loot, which is fabulous here in Finsbury Park. which we saw last night, and the players now have it. You know, it is really solid, and it is as contemporary as the headlines about fake news, you know.
And possibly it's something that comes from practice, saying the lines to an audience and getting the knowledge of where the laughs are and what the timing is that gives you that knowledge.
Of course, Ken, in the famous second production of Loot, which was a huge success.
Yes.
So why is it that Joe Orton's plays have taken time for actors, directors to learn how to handle? I mean, what was the difference between the first production of Loot and the second?
Well, the difference was partly through friendship and admiration, is that Joe Orton had Truscott, the main policeman in Loot, played by Kenneth Williams.
In the first production?
In the first production of his second full-length play. And this went on tour, and it got as far as Wimbledon. That was the old tradition, is that you toured around the country and then you came into the West End. And from Kenneth Williams' diaries, he was getting more and more miserable on this tour. I didn't see it, but I imagine he went into all his funny voices and all the rest of it. And what you have to do, what's central to Truscott, is you have to beat up on stage Hal, the son. I cannot imagine Kenneth Williams beating up anyone.
Especially not you.
Well, it wasn't me. It was Ian McShane. Can you imagine Kenneth Williams beating up Ian McShane? I can't.
A very significant part of his meteoric rise, you know, because not only was this a working class writer, this was a felon. Mm-hmm. So it became. So I think that by this point maybe that's quite a rehearsed idea to be able to talk about the positive effects of prison, because in lots of the interviews when he had had the first success with entertaining Mr. Sloane, all the interviewers want to know about is being in prison, being a lag, so it sort of, it gave him a kind of badge of honour beyond, just being another working class writer.
But I just want to pick up on something you said, Lenny, about soft underbelly underneath this apparent sort of toughness.
Being in prison, there are two things that keep in mind. First of all, it was the first time in his adult life when he'd lived apart from Hallowell, which is crucial. And also, the fact that he was in prison and it was shaming, we talked about this last night, he was, in his own mind, he was now absolutely beyond, he had gone as far outside of the norm as he could be. He was a criminal in the eyes. So he was, in his own, he achieved a kind of detachment from society, from the hopes of being embraced as a good citizen. So he was being outside and being detached, changed the metabolism of him. And you can see that how he wrote before he went in. If you read what he wrote up to at that point, and then what he said was that the old whore society really lifted up his skirts when he had another idea of life after prison than he did before, which gave him the detachment and the insouciance in a way.
So you're saying it was the making of him as an artist in one way.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That his voice, that it actually, you can see the change in how he wrote. It's there. And so what prison really gave him was some internal shift that could manifest itself in the style.
And that's the start of the portrait that we're presenting in the film that we're making about him currently.
That's the right position.
Which is to start with that point because it is absolutely the moment where the chrysalis comes. I think that the sort of interplay between the world that he's commenting on, his own experiences, and the play, and the literary influences are so extraordinary. I mean, I remember John saying to me that what first brought him into sort of understanding Joe's world was reading a little extract in the diary where there was a sort of little moment of revelation, and I found a similar one when he was commenting on a character called Peter Wills, a television executive, about going home and going to Mum's funeral and reporting the way that his family behaved, and saying to Peter Wills, and saying that Peter Wills actually, for a moment, glanced and got this idea that I don't write fantasies, I write the truth, I write my truth. And I think it's that relationship that I sort of want to do, to try to find a new way to see how the life, the world that Joe was experiencing and the other influences actually went into that extraordinary.
I mean, I think this lack of seemingly emotional involvement with anyone really is what Peggy Ramsey termed detachment. I mean, John talks more eloquently than me about this idea of detachment, but I always see it that, you know, we were such a dysfunctional family that we never sort of engaged with each other or with anyone or our parents.
So are you saying that detachment, John was attributing the detachment artistically to Joe's spell in prison. Are you saying it was there anyway
I think,
within the family?
I think it was. I mean, I said to John last night, I think before he went into prison, he had all his ducks. But when he came out of prison, he was able to line them up. So it sort of started to make sense.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's always possible that Peggy could have destroyed pages that she thought might be
Of the diary.
of the diaries, yeah, the Missing Beta diary. But I actually think something else has come to mind. What?
But the point is that his diary's finished on the 1st of August, and Joe died on the 9th of August. So
No, it's not, and it's also that Joe always finished what he was writing, and the diaries end in mid-sentence.
Yeah.
But when Hallowell killed Joe, he left a note saying, "The diaries will explain everything." And they sort of, they don't, but they also do in this sense. And I disagree with Leone. I think given the extraordinary success of Joe and the extraordinary envious attack in a room, they lived together in a room that was something like 10 by 16, a really, really small room. Joe had to get out, wanted to get out. And the diaries were written, in other words, two people couldn't stand in the same room. And the diaries were written and have all sorts of things that the diaries that exist have all accounts of their fights, their sex, Orton's trolleying. They were written and put in a drawer that was unlocked, so that the diaries were, in my view, a part of the way Orton was trying to extricate himself from a man who had schooled him, paid for him, given him his writing life, who he owed an allegiance to, but had outgrown. So that the diaries might indeed explain everything, but the actual pages of the diaries are somehow missing. And I appealed, when I was writing the book, to the Home Office to see to get them. I appealed to the police. Nothing will be found.
Okay, so
I was just going to say, and John, you've come to understand now since you wrote the book. You were saying to me that this is the one thing that you now consider, that they're almost like the third character.
If I was writing the book
story.
again, I would put I would make that point, which I didn't make in the book, but I would have put more credence to the dramatic power of the act of diary writing in the midst of a man having a breakdown. You would lock it away if you wanted it to be private, but I don't think personally, psychologically, that Orton wanted it to be private.